Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Mountbattens, The Lives and Loves of Dickie and Edwina Mountbatten, by Andrew Lownie. Narrated by Shaun Grindell. Preface. No biography has any value unless it is written with warts and all. Lord Mountbatten. Writing to Richard Huff about how he would like to be acknowledged in Huff's book, Louis and Victoria, Dickie Mountbatten suggested, naval officer who became First Sea Lord after being Supreme Allied Commander and Viceroy of India, and thus the best-known figure the Navy has produced since Nelson, as well as being the President of the Society of Genealogists. The entry reveals much: Mountbatten's achievements, what he valued, and his pomposity. No figure has a longer entry in Who's Who, apart from Winston Churchill, partly because every minor organisation is mentioned, but also because Dickie Mountbatten had a remarkable life. As one obituary noted, it seemed almost unbelievable that one human being could have touched the history of our century at so many points. Head of Combined Operations, a member of the Chiefs of Staff, and then Supreme Commander of Allied Forces in Southeast Asia during the Second World War, the last Viceroy and First Governor-General of India, First Sea Lord and Chief of the Defence Staff, member of the Royal Family and mentor of Prince Philip and Prince Charles. His life, which covered the first 80 years of the 20th century, also provides an opportunity to look at some of the most important and controversial issues of the period, from the 1942 Dieppe raid to Indian independence. His biography cannot be told without also considering the life of his wife, Edwina, the richest heiress in the world when they married, whose reputation for her global humanitarian work endures. Philip Ziegler's magisterial official life of Dickie was published in 1985, and Janet Morgan's deft, authorized life of Edwina came out 6 years later. What is missing is a shorter, joint biography of these two remarkable figures, a book which is also a portrait of an unusual marriage, one that was loving and mutually supportive, but also beset with infidelities. As Dickie would later claim, Edwina and I spent all our married lives getting into other people's beds. With the Mountbattens, the private life did intrude into the public life, not least in the question over the nature of the relationship between Edwina and the Indian Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, and how far it affected the perception of the impartiality of the Mountbattens during independence. Even after countless books on the couple, the questions remain. Was Mountbatten one of the outstanding leaders of his generation, or a man over-promoted because of his royal birth, high-level connections, film star looks, and ruthless self-promotion? What is the true story behind controversies such as the Dieppe raid and Indian partition, and the love affair between Edwina and Nehru? The authorized biographies had certain subjects they had to cover and to avoid. Now, 30 years later, with many of those involved in the story dead, with new papers released and new sensitivities, there is a case for a new book. The interesting biography will be the one that is published in 30 or 40 years' time, when the dust has settled, wrote Mountbatten's military assistant Pat McClellan to Brian Kimmins, a wartime member of Dickie's staff in 1980. This book is that attempt. Prologue. Tuesday, the 18th of July, 1922. In spite of the rain, by breakfast, 600 people had gathered outside St. Margaret's, the 12th century church in the shadow of Westminster Abbey, and a favourite for society weddings. By lunchtime, the crowd would swell to 8,000. For the Daily Telegraph, this was to be the wedding of the year. The Star thought it the wedding of the century, between the beautiful Edwina Ashley, the richest girl in the world, and Lord Louis Mountbatten, the handsome naval officer and a member of the extended royal family. King George V and Queen Mary and most members of the royal family were attending, with the Prince of Wales as best man. At exactly 2:15 p.m., Edwina entered the church to Wagner's Lohengrin. The service was conducted by Dickie's former school tutor, Frederick Lawrence Long. The Lord is my shepherd was followed by the hymns Thine for Ever and May the Grace of God our Saviour, whilst Beethoven's Hallelujah was sung during the signing of the register. The couple, Dickie at 6'2", dwarfing his wife, emerged from the church to Mendelssohn's Wedding March, just as the sun broke through the rain, and they walked under the traditional arch of swords of a naval guard of honour. Mountbatten, his sharp, chiselled face set in a solemn expression, was dressed in a long blue frock coat, and golden epaulettes in the dress uniform of a naval lieutenant, and carrying his father's gold-hilted sword. Edwina, blue-eyed and fair-haired, was in a simple, ankle-length frosted silver dress, with a wreath of orange blossom on her head, and a 4-foot train of silver cloth, covered with 15th-century lace. They climbed into the bridal car, a Rolls-Royce, a wedding gift from Edwina bought from the Prince of Wales, which was then drawn by a naval gun crew around Parliament Square. Around the corner, a flag-draped lorry took over, towing the car past Buckingham Palace to the reception at the bride's home, Brooke House in Park Lane. There, the entrance to the 2 ground-floor reception rooms, where a narrow dividing room had been made into an avenue of 10-foot orange trees, the couple received their 800 guests. So large was the wedding cake, with its top tier shaped like a crown, plus miniature anchors, sails and hawsers, and tiny lifeboats hanging from silver davits, that it took 4 men to lift it. The wedding had attracted attention around the world, with entire issues of magazines devoted to it, postcards and souvenirs produced to commemorate the occasion, and a 40-minute film for Pathé News. The list of presents took up a whole page of the Times, and included, for Edwina, a pendant with a royal cipher in diamonds from Queen Alexandra, a brooch from the Aga Khan, a horse from the Maharaja of Jaipur, and the bracelet she had only recently returned to her previous suitor, Geordie, Duke of Sutherland. Mountbatten's gifts were of a more practical bent, reflecting his interests: a ship's telescope, a copper hot water jug, and an aneroid barometer, and from the king, the award Knight Commander Victorian Order, to add to his cherished Japanese Order of the Rising Sun, and Grand Cross Order of the Nile. Finally, at 5 p.m, they set off in the Rolls-Royce for the bride's family home, Broadlands, to begin their married life together. Chapter 1. Beginnings. The marriage had brought together 2 of the most glamorous figures of the period. Dickie Mountbatten, born on the 25th of June 1900 at Frogmore House, was a great-grandson and godson of Queen Victoria. His mother, Victoria, born in 1863, was the daughter of the Queen's second daughter, Alice. Dickie's mother was to be an important influence, encouraging in her youngest child supreme self-confidence, and acting as his tutor between the ages of 5 and 9. She taught me English, German, French, and Latin. She taught me world history in a horizontal manner, he later recalled. In the Elizabethan era, I knew what was going on in Europe and India, as well as in England. He was christened Louis Francis Albert Victor Nicholas, the Victor and Albert in tribute to his great-grandparents, though from an early age he was always known as Dickie with a Y or Dickie with an IE. His father, Prince Louis, born in 1854 in Austria, was the son of Prince Alexander and Princess Julie of Hesse, the oldest ruling Protestant dynasty in the world. But, as it was a morganatic marriage, the children were excluded from the succession to the sovereignty of Hesse. This genealogical flaw in Mountbatten's ascendance was to be an embarrassment, which he would seek to brush over in later life. Dickie's father had joined the Royal Navy, aged 14, and enjoyed a successful naval career, becoming Director of Naval Intelligence shortly after his younger son's birth. Part of the slightly loose set around Edward VII, his torso boasted a tattoo of a dragon. In 1881 he fathered a child, Jean-Marie, with the King's mistress, Lily Langtry. In 1884, Prince Louis had married his cousin, Victoria, eldest daughter of Grand Duke Louis of Hesse, and a favourite granddaughter of Queen Victoria, and their children, Alice, Louise, and George, were born respectively in 1885, 1889, and 1892. Fluent in French and German, a skilled pianist and artist, who had been elected to the Royal Institute of Painters in watercolours, he was worshipped by his youngest child. As the youngest, and with a gap of 15 and 8 years with his siblings, Dickie was used to amusing himself and getting his own way. He later recollected, "I was spoilt, and no one minded." His was an essentially female household, as his brother and father were seldom at home, where he was doted on by his mother, 2 elder sisters, and various female members of staff. This was to have a powerful effect on him in later life. He was always to get on with women better than men, who were either to be admired, like his father and brother, or seen as antagonists to be defeated. It was also, with his regular visits to German relations at the family homes at Heiligenberg Castle and Wolfsgarten, a much more cosmopolitan upbringing than that enjoyed by most British children of the time. Just after his first birthday, he had stayed with the Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich, the governor of Moscow, before going on to the Peterhof Palace. For Christmas 1905, he received from the Tsar, who was married to Dickie's aunt, a replica uniform of the crack Chevalier Guard, complete with helmet, breastplate, boots, spurs and sword. It was to be the start of a lifelong love of uniforms. The summer of 1908 was spent staying with various Russian relations where, at the Nicholas Palace in St. Petersburg, he became friendly with his cousin, the Grand Duke Dmitri, one of the two conspirators behind the death of Rasputin. This was followed by a week with Tsar Nicholas and his family at the Peterhof Palace. In 1910, Prince Louis, who had had a series of postings around the Mediterranean, was made Commander-in-Chief of the Atlantic Fleet and decided to send Dickie to boarding school. His parents picked Lockers Park, a fashionable prep school just north of London with strong naval connections, which Dickie's cousin Maurice and brother George had attended a few years previously. Shortly after arriving, he wrote to his mother, "Some of my nicknames are Batter Pudding, two things beginning with P, Prince and Pig, also London Fire Brigade like LFB. One boy spelt my name Batumberg. A diligent but unpredictable student, his term positions fluctuated widely. At the end of his first term, he was 8th in a class of 10, but by the end of 1910 he was 1st. His behaviour has been excellent, and I am pleased to see he is less inclined to worry over trivial matters, ran his report. Throughout 1911, he remained in the bottom half of the class, with his best subjects history and geography, but by the following year he was top and had received the form prize. He was a kind and popular child. One contemporary, Sir Hamilton Kerr, later remembered how, when he was lonely and miserable at the school, he discovered that Mountbatten could speak German. We talked German on Sunday afternoons, walking up and down the school lawn. One never forgets these kindnesses of early youth. Not naturally athletic, nevertheless, Dickie managed to reach the finals of the boxing competition and captain the second football team. Above all, his qualities of leadership were beginning to be recognised, and he became a prefect. His headmaster wrote in his final report, "He has always acted on the principle that if a thing is worth doing, it is worth doing well. We all regret that his stay at the school has come to an end, and I am confident of his future success." In May 1913, Mountbatten followed his brother George's footsteps to Osborne, the Navy's training school on the Isle of Wight, passing in 15th out of the 83 candidates. His score was 440 out of 600, with the top mark 498, and English and German his best subjects. Osborne was very different from Lockers Park. The 430 boys, many from naval families, were subject to naval discipline, and instead of school uniform they wore naval dress, ranging from monkey jackets to dress uniforms for special occasions. The curriculum was focused on subjects such as engineering, navigation and seamanship, and it was a tough environment aimed at developing self-discipline, initiative and confidence. There was lots of bullying, and Dickie, cocky and feminine-looking, was frequently bullied. In May, he got into a fight with a boy who had been at Lockers Park, John Scott, who teased him about his name. The brass plate on his bedside sea chest described him as Serene Highness, earning the respect of his peers when he fought back. At the end of Dickie's first term, he was 33rd out of 81. His tutor A.P. Boissier, who taught maths, wrote, "He has made an excellent start. He invariably shows great keenness in everything and is always out to learn." By the next term, he was second in English and history, with Boissier noting, "He possesses the gift of thoroughly mastering a subject before he allows himself to pass on." This was to prove a characteristic throughout his life. He was playing drums in the college band, taking fencing lessons, boxing, playing in the second 11 hockey, and in October he stroked the winning boat in the first-year skiffs. Already he was showing an interest in wireless telegraphy, and with a friend he spent hours trying to pick up broadcasts from the Eiffel Tower on a primitive crystal receiver. The summer of 1913 was spent in Hesse with his older siblings. Alice, now married to Prince Andrew of Greece, Louise and George, now a lieutenant serving in the Basel cruiser HMS New Zealand. They were joined in Hesse by the Tsar and Tsarina and their 5 children, with one of whom, 14-year-old Marie, Dickie fell in love. "I was crackers about Marie, and was determined to marry her," he remembered. "She was absolutely lovely. I keep her photograph on the mantelpiece in my bedroom. Always have." Within 5 years, all the family would be dead at the hands of the Bolsheviks. On the 28th of June 1914, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo, and the countdown to war began. Prince Louis had become First Sea Lord in 1912, and Dickie was invited to watch a full test mobilization of the fleet on the 18th of July. Dickie was thrilled to watch the Royal Review at Spithead in front of King George V, with the full might of the Royal Navy laid out in front. Some 59 battleships, 55 cruisers, 78 destroyers, 16 submarines, and a host of lesser craft, and to meet Admiral Jellicoe and Winston Churchill, the First Lord of the Admiralty. Dickie had met Churchill several times before, not least when he had paid an official visit to Osborne. When Churchill had asked the cadets if they had any requests, Dickie had been the first to respond. "Please, sir, may we please have 3 sardines for Saturday supper instead of only 2? "I'll see to that," Churchill assured him. The sardines were never forthcoming. It was a lesson that Dickie was to remember. It was Prince Louis, alone on duty on the fateful Friday before the outbreak of war, who had to make the decision not to stand down the fleet, but keep them mobilized. It proved to be a wise decision. The following day, Germany and Russia declared war on each other, and on the 4th of August, the United Kingdom declared war on Germany. There was an almost instant wave of anti-German feeling, with assaults on suspected Germans. Even Dachshunds were targeted, and the looting of stores owned by people with German-sounding names. Mountbatten initially joked to his mother on the 14th of August that Papa has turned out to be a genuine spy, and has been discreetly marched off to the tower, where he is guarded by beefeaters. I got rather a rotten time of it for about 3 days, as little fools, like Stopsford, insisted on calling me German spy, and kept on heckling me and trying to make things unpleasant for me. In October, the German-accented Prince Louis, feeling that the criticisms of him as head of the Navy were a distraction from the war effort, resigned as First Sea Lord. He had faithfully served his adopted country for 46 years, and yet Winston Churchill made no attempt to dissuade him. His son was devastated. Another cadet saw a contemporary standing in front of the Osborne mast with tears running down his cheeks. It was Dickie. From that day, he was to have one consuming ambition, to avenge his father's dismissal and become First Sea Lord himself. A descendant of the Native American Princess Pocahontas, the Prime Minister Lord Palmerston and the reformer and philanthropist the 7th Earl of Shaftesbury, Edwina was born on the 20th of November 1901. Her father, Wilfred Ashley, was a former colonel in the Grenadier Guards, who would later become a Conservative Member of Parliament. Her maternal grandfather was the banker Sir Ernest Cassel, financial adviser to Edward VII. The king was Edwina's godfather, and she was named after him, one of the richest men in the world. Cassel, whose wife had died within 3 years of marriage, was very close to his only child and her firstborn daughter, and provided one of the few anchors in Edwina's rather rootless youth. Edwina's father was a remote figure, busy pursuing his parliamentary business or sporting interests, and her mother, Maud, frequently ill, had no idea how to be a parent to Edwina. Maud died of tuberculosis in February 1911, when Edwina was 9 and her sister Mary was 5. Neither child was allowed to attend the funeral at Romsey Abbey. Edwina wrote to her father, "I am so very sorry darling Mamma left us all so suddenly and forever. I wanted to kiss her once, and now I didn't. But it is very nice to think her spirit will always be with me. She never spoke of her mother again in public. Both daughters found it hard to come to terms with their mother's death, but displayed it in different ways. Edwina was forced to grow up quickly, becoming ever neater and more dutiful, while Mary responded by becoming more willful and uncooperative. Motherless and starved of affection at home, Edwina poured her love into caring for her animals: puppies, ponies, rabbits, kittens, a goat, and, a present from her grandfather, an Arab horse. Educated at home, she was a conscientious and organized student, who by the age of 10 could read German, write in French, and play the piano. She had a particular love for geography, noted one biographer. Maps fascinated her. Talk of distant lands gripped her attention, and she would read travel books voraciously. The situation improved with the arrival of a new governess, Laura de Verrier, in September 1912. Young, warm-hearted and fun, she made lessons interesting, and the two girls adored her, but their happiness did not last for long. In August 1914, Wilfred, lonely and feeling he needed a wife for his political career, remarried. He had met Molly Forbes Semple on the political circuit, and they married weeks after she had secured a divorce from her naval officer husband. Molly quickly made herself unpopular with everyone through her bossiness, insensitivity, and attempts to make changes, from replacing the brocade wall coverings at the family home in Hampshire, Broadlands, to strict new rules that the children should be sent to bed at 6:30. A guest who came back early from fishing because of the rain was made to eat his lunch in the hall, rather than bring his wet boots into the dining room. She insisted the girls call her Madre, and when travelling by train she would go first class, but put them in third. Laura de Verrier, regarded as a threat, was dismissed, which only increased the girls' unhappiness and sense of rejection. Wilfred, fearful of confrontation and busy raising and training a battalion to take to France, turned a blind eye rather than stand up for his daughters. The anti-German hysteria that had affected the Battenbergs was now directed at the German-born Ernest Cassel. In spite of being one of the largest subscribers to the war loan, and entrusted with an official mission to the United States to secure a loan of $500,000, he was accused of being friendly with the German emperor, and having a specially designed wireless set on the roof of Brooke House to maintain contact with the country of his birth. Sir George McGill, secretary of the Anti-German Union, brought a lawsuit to strip Castle of his membership of the Privy Council. It failed, but for Edwina, like her future husband remembering his father's experiences, it was something she would never forget. Chapter 2. Students. Dickie had ended his Osborne career on a high note, graduating first in physics, second in engineering, and third in seamanship. In January 1915, he moved on to Britannia Royal Naval College, more commonly known as Dartmouth, for the next stage of his naval training. He again threw himself into student life, editing a magazine with close friend Kit Bradford, beagling, running, fencing, playing cricket, rugger, tennis, fives and squash, generally with more enthusiasm than success, and attending the Saturday night dance with wives and daughters of officers on the station. It is inevitable that boys going through puberty, thrown together and with very few girls, should indulge in adolescent homosexual experimentations, though Dickie's reaction to his colleagues' antics to a later generation may appear priggish and naive. He wrote to his mother, her reaction is unknown, in June. Dr. Moon is going to have the talk with me soon. People here are becoming too swinish for words. It is awfully difficult not to get contaminated by them, when you have them talking filth or, almost worse still, hinting at nasty things during meals and when we are in bed and in the gunroom. Some people in the other dormitory have even begun to do filthy things, I have heard. His first holidays from Dartmouth were spent with George on HMS New Zealand, steaming off Heligoland, guarding the edge of a large minefield and covering some 2,000 sea miles. He wrote in his diary, "I am having the time of my life." George had been given a portable projector for 35mm films, and he would borrow films from a local cinema and show them to the ship's company. It was to kindle a passion that his younger brother was to enjoy for the rest of his life. Dickie had been in an isolation hospital with German measles for most of May, Then in July he was ill again. Often prone to injury from his fearlessness, in February 1916 he sprained his ankle in a tobogganing accident and then broke his leg, requiring him to sit his final exams in hospital. Bored, he placed an advertisement in the personal column of the Times. A young naval officer, injured and in hospital, desires correspondence. The reaction was immediate, as he told his mother. On the Saturday I got 100 letters, and today I got 75 letters with a possible prospect of more to come. They vary from a society girl in Curzon Street and a merry widow in Stanhope Gardens to a typist in Whitechapel and a chauffeur who looks after a Ford car. In the end, over 200 women, most of them in their 20s, wrote to him until he placed another ad, regretting he could not respond individually. Leaving Dartmouth in April 1916, he was disappointed not to go to sea, thereby missing the Battle of Jutland the following month, unlike his brother George. Instead, his cohort spent 3 months at Keam, the engineering college, but it was to be a turning point in his career. 2 days after his 16th birthday, he wrote to his mother, "I was surprised myself to find that I had passed out first from Keam." His first posting in July 1916 was as a junior midshipman to Admiral Beatty's flagship HMS Lion, employed as a general dog's body to the captain, John Chatfield. "My action station is on the Fore Bridge, which I believe is about the best station going. Only one suffers from the blast of one's own guns," he wrote excitedly to his mother. "I'm awfully pleased to be up there, as one can see something of what's going on. My chief job is tending voice pipes, and that is where the Admiral and his staff are, as a rule. At sea, I'm in the White Watch, and keep watch at the 4 guns by night with 2 other fellows. At day, I keep submarine watch. I have been having a ripping time." The sub-lieutenant in charge of the gunroom was a bully, and took every opportunity to curb the natural exuberance of the young midshipman, but Dickie thrived on the discipline and hard work and the demands of war. In August, Lion escaped a mine and a torpedo attack in the North Sea, defending Sunderland from a German bombardment. Dickie was thrilled. He had achieved his ambition and been bloodied in war. In order to divide and rule, Molly had sent Mary to boarding school to keep the sisters apart. Edwina continued her lonely childhood at Broadlands, her main enjoyment baiting her stepmother. A favourite ploy was to write in French or German, languages Molly could not speak. Most of the time was spent in lessons with her governess, Miss Atwood, but there was time to ride and hunt with the Hursley hounds, and she read voraciously, A Study in Scarlet and Dombey and Son being particular favourites. It was then her short-sightedness was discovered, and she was prescribed spectacles, but discarded them whenever she could. From this point her eyesight worsened, as did the headaches that were to plague her throughout her life. From an early age, Edwina was organised and tidy. The schoolroom books were catalogued, and her diary scrupulously listed everyone's birthday, as well as the names of all the visitors to Broadlands, with the times of their arrival and, more importantly, departure. It was a means of her exerting control on a world in which she had little say. Evidence of that came in the summer of 1916, when she learnt that she, too, was being sent away to school. The excuse was that it was felt she had too few companions, but, as she noted in her diary, it was clear the reason was that Marjorie wanted to get rid of me and Miss A, the pig. In September 1916, aged 14, she joined Mary at the Links in Eastbourne, which was run by Miss Jane Potts, a former governess to Queen Victoria's granddaughter, Princess Alice, and known to the girls as Potty. Edwina quickly shone, coming top in French and German, excelling in music, drawing and English literature, and playing in the cricket and tennis teams. Now, with schoolgirl companions, her strong competitive streak came out, but she champed at the petty rules and restrictions. She was used to being a free spirit and found the routine and discipline of school life irksome. In autumn 1918, she followed several of her friends to Auld House, a mixture of finishing school and domestic science training college on the Suffolk coast at Aldborough. Its aim over the year's course was to teach 20 girls at a time how to run a household. The training ranged from cleaning, cooking, dressmaking, and doing their own laundry to comportment, etiquette, ordering stores, and paying wages. As always, Edwina flourished, and she was one of two students.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?